Brandon McDonald, CEO of Fireweed Metals. Capital structure is kind of an obligatory thing to talk about at a investment conference, but I think there's a couple things that I really want to highlight here. First, cash on hand, $40 million. So the most money we've ever had in the company by a margin of 3, I think, or certainly well over double. Positions us extremely well, and critically, although we now have 135 million shares out, this is really certainly on a percentage basis, and maybe even on a management, on a absolute basis, some of the lowest float we've had in a long time. But things have been really tightened up, right? So we have the Lundin Group came in that last financing and contributed 20 of the 35 million we raised in December. Pretty huge endorsement from a group that needless to say has a pretty strong track record in mining. They've had some amazing success behind them. Have really been able to enjoy the fruits of that success for sure. And a multi-year discussion with them really culminating in them having the confidence to come in late last year. But we can't really overlook that the management still owns around 10%. Tech owns just under 10% and came in the last financing, came in the one before that, came in the one before that. So this is a company that they've been closely following, obviously, and have a high degree of confidence in. And maybe for the people who follow the company closely, you'll know Larry Childress and the Childress Family Trust owns just over 11% of the company. Larry also making a big purchase in the market recently. This is, Larry's an amazing guy who's had a huge amount of success in mining and oil and gas, and is, as a CEO, the best possible shareholder you could ever have. Because in addition to contributing a bunch of money in private placements, he must have bought 3 million shares on the open market in the last 12 to 18 months. So that's really helped mop up a lot of loose shares and really has given us the traction we've needed to have really an outstanding 2022 and what will be an outstanding 2023. So not surprisingly, here you are in the Yukon Pavilion. We have 3 projects, 2 of which are in Yukon. Our MacMillan Pass zinc project is, I would still consider it to be the flagship of the company. That's a zinc lead silver project on the eastern part of Yukon Territory, just northeast of Ross River. Our Mac Tung project, that's a tungsten project, immediately adjacent to it. That deposit actually crosses the border. So that is a transboundary project. Much better to be a transboundary project, Yukon NWT, than I guess maybe a Chile, Argentina, or something like that. Little easier politics to manage. That's a great project that I'm going to get into here. And then our Gaina River project, entirely within the NWT territory, which I'm going to touch a little bit on the end here. I know it's I'm in the Yukon Pavilion, so it's I'm going to get some stink eye if I talk too much about projects in NWT, but I will touch on that at the end. But critically, the panel we just came off, we talked a lot about infrastructure, and really, one of the key things about our project, as remote as it is, and it's proper remote, there's a road to it. We're able to bring a truck and trailer in. On those trucks, we bring in heavy equipment. We bring all the drills, all the fuel and stuff in a tanker. This is radically different than a lot of Yukon exploration programs that are stuck flying in everything. It's a very different cost structure when you have to fly in all your fuel, when you have to fly in all your lumber, et cetera, than when you're able to bring in, trailers for camps, when you're able to bring in a D6 or a D7 for roads and skid drilling. We're lucky that in 2020, the government committed $71 million to our access roads, to the Resource Gateway program. A lot of that's an improvement of the road right to the project. And that's a great example of the Yukon government in collaboration with the federal government, contributing to project success in Yukon. And it unlocks our MacMillan Pass and Mac Tung project, but it really opens up a lot of opportunities for other projects in the area, including Snowline, who had such great success just to the north of us. So first, our MacMillan Pass project. This is a project, we bought the core of this. The bottom right, you can see the Tom and Jason deposits. We bought those from Hudbay, or at least agreed to buy them from Hudbay in 2016. Took the company public in 2017 around that. Did some drilling to kind of firm up their historic resource and published some numbers in early 2018 that you see there. 11.2 million tons indicated, 39.5 million tons inferred at around 10% zinc equivalent. This is pretty big, right? So, in the context of global undeveloped zinc projects, right up there, and something that could be in the sort of top 15 to 20 largest zinc mines in the world, just Tom and Jason combined. But really what we saw, and I say we, this is really my geological team who have the eye for these things. We do have a saying in the company, I don't know how many geologists we employ right now. I think we employ about 10. I'm 10th best, which is the way I like to keep it. We don't hire geologists who are worse than me. I've been out of the game for a while. But they recognized a trend that went from Tom and Jason sort of northwest up the property there. Described it as the fertile corridor, really having to do with the right set of rocks and the right structures for fluid. And that led to the kind of rediscovery of Boundary Main, which had been a historic a target of Caminco's back in the day, and then the total grassroots discovery of Boundary West. But you look at some of the drill holes in this project, 14% zinc over 14 meters. You got 7% zinc, 5% lead, 120 grams silver over 14 meters. End zone, which is not included in that resource, 4% zinc, 17% lead, and 145 grams silver almost over 9 meters. And this goes on and on. Boundary Main, 8% zinc over 100 meters from surface, true width. Great intersection at Boundary West last year, 24% zinc, 3% lead, and 76 grams silver over 10 meters. Thing here is the intersection we announced late last year, 12.3% zinc, just over 1% lead, and 45 grams silver over 124 meters, which, best we can tell, is the single best greenfields zinc hole in terms of grade width in the last 10, 15 years anywhere. And these holes, what all these holes have in common is that not a single one of them is included in that resource. So when we think about the sort of opportunity to take what is a 50 million ton resource and grow it and improve it, 7 of the 10 best drill holes in the project ever, from the beginning of drilling in 1950, sit outside the 2018 resource. So this is when we think about that resource and the economics that we built on top of that, which were very healthy economics, that's really, it's not just a base case. It's like a rearview mirror case. We're so far past it and able to do so much more with this project. And so much of that success has come at the boundary zone. This is an area, like I said, that we purchased off Teck following that resource update. We bought this in 2018. It was a bit of an enigma to them. They hadn't done any work on it in a long time. We came in and kind of gave it some new thought. It had been described as a failed SEDEX system. We didn't think that was necessarily a great description, and our chief geo, Jack Milton, really took a look at it and did some thinking on it, and we did a gravity survey which discovered the Boundary West to the west of that, and that was a great discovery because we turned around that survey, a field level interpretation of it, and the discovery drill hole within one season, which is no mean feat, and that's as I highlighted in the last slides, where we've had some amazing intersections, including the cross section you see here, which is the best ever drill hole in the project. And I can tell you just don't see intersections with this kind of grade over that kind of width. And that intersection is part of a zone we call the massive sulfide zone of Boundary West. That the first drill hole into it was about 40 meters of, I think, 4.5% zinc or something like that. And we saw an opportunity to vector towards the higher grade and kind of hotter part of that system. And through really good science, we were able to do that. And there's no particular reason to believe that this is the guts of it, right? Like, not even close. Particularly, we see, as you get hotter and hotter into the system, the zinc to lead ratio, or the lead to zinc ratio, gets higher. So we see that at Tom and Jason, where you start to get lead and silver dominant as you really get into the feeder. We're still not seeing that at Boundary West. So there's so much opportunity to continue to grow that system. And the lovely thing about this is that whereas Boundary Main was kind of interpreted as a low-grade open pit target, Boundary West It could definitely be open pit, but could also be some real opportunity for super high margin underground here. With such consistency and such widths, you're going to be able to use real bulk tonnage underground methods there. So this is, the boundary zone is ultimately a massive game changer for the project and for the company. Something that I don't think anyone, obviously if Teck had suspected that this was possible, they would have tested it before vending it to us, but really affirmed that this is a project that, like I said, had been drilled since 1951 and 130,000 meters into it, and we're still hitting the best ever holes. Super, super exciting, and we're just, as much has been done, we're just kind of getting started. And then with resources on Tom and Jason, which I think for people who are interested, happy to talk through this at a different time, but don't sleep on how much bigger Tom and Jason can get. There's so much opportunity for both of them. Both are open for expansion quite a bit. Some of the best drill holes there sit outside the 2018 resource. But End Zone's never had a resource on it, although we think it's pretty small. It's going to be quite high grade. Boundary and Boundary Main, massive opportunity there. But along this trend, which is following a major crustal scale fault, in the second order intersection, or second order faults as it intersects that, seems to be a fluid conduit to produce more of these deposits. So we have, I think we kind of have our best targets here, but there's over a dozen total, right? So we're in such a target-rich environment here that it certainly feels to me this is the sort of project that you launch with a nice, big, healthy 20-year mine life, 20-year reserve, but you ultimately end up producing for 40, 60, 80 years. There's just such an opportunity here to mine one zone, progressively reclaim it as you begin to commence on the next one. That I think it's going to be go down as one of the world's great zinc mines when viewed historically. But we might not get a chance to look at it historically for 100 years, given the potential here. And so Tung, this was one that I got to say, we weren't itching to get into a metal even more niche than zinc, but it was right next to our Mac Pass project, held by the government of NWT. They got it out of the bankruptcy of North American Tungsten when they left behind a liability at the Tung mine, which is about 200 kilometers south of here. They had tried to sell it in conjunction with Tung, and nobody was really interested in tying this, which is an incredible asset, to the boat anchor of a mine that needed remediation. So we did, after years of talking to them, convince them to sell it directly to us without Tung. And, one of the big parts of our pitch, and one of the things that really should matter to an investment community as well, is we saw, total thumbsuck, sort of 9 figures of opportunities in terms of synergies, capital and opportunity, capital and operating costs. So it made sense for there to be one proponent for both these projects. We already knew the First Nations in the area. We already had a track record of operating here. So it was good that the government saw this and sold the project to us. And it's, tungsten is a niche metal, but as I was saying on the panel before this is the right time for Western governments to get serious about rare earths, tungsten, and other metals where the supply is absolutely dominated by one country, where there may not be the just best kind of political relationship. You can imagine, this is a metal that 85% of it comes from China in terms of mine supply. That's not processing in China, that's mine supply in China, right? So there is no making a car. You cannot machine a car, engine or frame without tungsten hardened steels. You do not have aerospace. You do not have many defense applications. You do not have integrated circuits, etc., without tungsten. The anxiety, which I think is probably the right word, of some Western governments about this situation is pretty high. And a project like ours is unique in its ability to feed the Western demand for this. And why is that? Because you take a look at a chart like this, and the x-axis there, you've got tungsten grade, right? And on the y-axis, you've got contained tungsten oxide, tungstate. So, as you expect on a typical chart like this, the big projects are low grade with a lot of contained metal, and the high grade projects tend not to be, contain a lot of metal, except Tung is not on this, and that's where it sits. So I've described it as a freakish outlier in the tungsten world. There is nothing like it. There's nothing that has MacTung grade that has anywhere near the size, and there's nothing that has MacTung size that has anywhere near the grade. So in terms of a project that can and should be supplying Western demand for tungsten, this is it. There's some other good projects out there, but there's nothing to the scale and opportunity of this. It's a project that you have to engineer carefully to avoid becoming your own worst enemy. You throttle production lest you flood the market, right? So this is a project where we could supply 5 to 8% of the world tungsten market for 50 years. And it's not fully delineated, right? So not surprisingly, given that situation, North American Tungsten, the previous owner who had last wanted to do drilling on it, was not really itching to expand the resource. Defining years 61 through 120 is not really moving the needle on the NPV. But it's a project that you're able to go to First Nations and say, like, look, this is not a big mine. This is a relatively benign project, and this is one that can you can work at, your children can work at, your children's children can work at, etc. Something where like you've seen in mines in Quebec and Ontario, where you have multi-generations work in the same project. So it's been a great opportunity for us, and now we're just kind of wrapping our head around how do we proceed with this. It has had a feasibility study before. It has been through the environmental assessment. So we're trying to understand, do we want to rely on that feasibility study and environmental assessment? Do we want to kind of put our own mark on it? And what does that mean in terms of delays to production? But undoubtedly an incredible opportunity. We will be drilling it this year, not for expansion, but for metallurgy. We really see some opportunities to really improve the metallurgy. And we are going to be releasing a new resource on this in probably about 2 or 3 months. We would have had it done already, and I had last year been projecting that we were actually expecting Q4 for the resource to be updated on this. But we saw an opportunity to re-assay and re-log a bunch of old core and pull, in addition to tungsten, copper, gold, and bismuth into the resource. We don't expect these to be massive game changers in the project. For those familiar with the Tung mine and other tungsten mines, not uncommon in certain zones for there to be enough copper to run a copper circuit, but it is an intermittent thing. So, I don't know what that means for the economics, but it could be something like a 10-ish, very wildly % difference in revenue, which is not huge, but it makes a difference. So that re-assaying means that we're now stuck in the labs to try to get those results back before we can update this. But most of the hard work is done, and as soon as we get those assays, it'll be out pretty quick here. So, like I said, probably May, June, I'm guessing for that. And should be, not going to be radically different than the historic resource there, but could be quite a little bit better anyways. And lastly, our Gaina River project. This is a project in NWT that Rio Tinto explored pretty extensively in the 70s. They were looking for a Mississippi Valley type deposit. So they were looking at back reef, flat limestone beds, where you get these very predictable limestone-hosted zinc-lead deposits. They developed an exploration target on that of about 30 to 50 million tons, about 4 to 4.5% lead, and 4 to 4.5% zinc, and a little bit of lead. But ultimately, felt like given the remoteness, and this is well and truly remote with no road into it, that it didn't make the cut. So it was restaked by Eagle Plains in the late 90s. They had a strategic alliance with Teck exploring in that region, because really the Mackenzie Mountains, from all the way down from Norzinc's Prairie Creek up to this and past, quite a bit of potential for zinc and lead. That alliance didn't continue, and the claims lapsed in 2018. Very shortly after the claims lapsed, an academic, Dr. Elizabeth Turner, who's at Laurentian University, was on a tour with Dr. David Broughton, who is the chief geologist, or was the chief geologist with Ivanhoe in DRC, and they were touring Kamoa-Kakula, but also Kapushi. And the theory at Kapushi was that there's a very abrupt front to Kapushi. They call it the big zinc zone. So this is 12 million tons at 34% zinc. Really, really anomalous in terms of grade at that sort of size. And and they had this abrupt front to it and some breccias there, and they felt that was a fault. Dr. Elizabeth Turner said, no, I did my master's at Gaina River. We see something similar there, and actually what it is the reef front. And the breccias are a tumble breccia where the reef is crumbling down and into the deep sea sediments below. So it kind of made them completely rethink how Kipushi was formed, and led to Dr. David Broughton and Dr. Liz Turner writing this paper that was published in late 2018, comparing the Gaina River opportunity to Kipushi. So 2022, my chief geo was saying, this paper was written 4 years ago and nobody staked this. Like, Kipushi is a pretty great opportunity. Like, that something like that would surely, clear the hurdle given the remote location. So we staked it. Cost us $30,000, right? Like, it was peanuts, open ground, no royalty on it because we staked it. Put in about $400,000 worth of work this year, half of which was paid by the NWT government through a grant. And really what we're looking for there is, given the sediments are all still upside or right side up there, pretty flat, you're looking for a reef front deposit that is going to be vertical, is going to have a very low surface footprint. And the way that Rio Tinto approached their drilling, first off, they weren't looking for the reef front. Second, they were drilling vertically. To hit something with that narrow, a target with vertical drilling when you're not even in that area would have been astronomically low chance of them finding it. Now, we don't know if there's a Kipushi here. Let's be honest, odds are there probably isn't, but for the cost that we paid for this and the scale of opportunity, it was a no-brainer to pick it up. And we do at our booth, which is just over here, have some rocks from there. And when this thing gets high-graded, it gets extraordinarily high-grade. So we're very excited about coming in. Don't know if we're going to drill this year. Certainly do some more geophysics, do some more prospecting, firm this up, and hopefully get a chance to test these targets. And there's some shots of the rocks. We might actually have those exact rocks here. And the geophysics and geochem that we firmed up. This is things like we were getting plus 10% or plus 20% lead in soil anomalies in this, and just incredible grades in hand samples as well. Why would you look at Fireweed? And I think, as we touched on in the panel, yes, governments are getting serious about critical minerals, and that is important. The government support makes a huge difference, but I think industry is. And one of the most interesting things that we've found is the amount of downstream companies that are getting interested in mining. You've seen it in nickel, in lithium, where automobile manufacturers are getting a little panicked about how they secure these things and are looking into the mining stage. So everything from government and industry is suddenly eyes on mining. We're going to have pretty sharp increase, I think, in metals in the coming years. And ultimately, in terms of zinc and tungsten, there aren't development projects like ours. There are some good projects out there. I'm not saying there's only one project to consider for zinc and tungsten, but we really think that these two are absolute standouts in this space. And then if you're looking to add zinc to your portfolio, or you'd like a bit of exposure to tungsten, you'd be remiss not to give Fireweed a serious look. We have Teck as a nearly 10% shareholder. They've re-upped, like I said, every year for the last couple of years. We have Lundin family who's come in and put $20 million into us. We have very strong backers who do very deep due diligence before they invest. And we have a very, very catalyst-rich year coming up. 2022 is not over for us, believe it or not. We still have only put out 2 of our 32 drill holes from last year. So, you have an opportunity now to enjoy the fruits of our 2022 labor in addition to our 2023. But, we expect that this year we're going to drill more than every year previously combined. For us, not on the whole project. We're not going to, unfortunately, be able to do 140,000 meters this year. But I think, 20,000 plus meters is a real possibility. Looking at a new study on Mac Tung and new studies on Mac Pass that'll pull in boundary zones certainly within the next 12 or 18 months as well. So it's a huge year for us, and I would welcome questions if there are any.
You talked about it. I think it was a Chinese name that you had taken over. Somebody went broke and the government gave it to you or something?
Yeah, it might have been that North American Tungsten went bankrupt in no small part because Chinese quotas on tungsten production flooded the market and dropped the price, right? So pretty hard for them to endure that, right? Is that what you were thinking about?
Yeah, I think so. And you had a map with a whole bunch of dots on, but you didn't have that company on.
Okay. Yeah, and yeah, look, it's an interesting times because the honestly, I think prior to the Critical Mineral Initiative, every junior mining company in the world was hoping that some Chinese SOE would come over the top to buy them. This is the lowest cost of capital. This is the most aggressive buyers. Maybe not even a profit motive, right? But unfortunately, I think now, for better, for worse, and I think it's ultimately going to end up being net better. I would struggle to imagine Canada would allow a Chinese SOE to buy a company like us, right? So they're serious about Western supply, and I think they want to see projects like ours come online.
What are the other comparable projects to the grade of your zinc, right? Rough, same size, if you could speak to that. Secondly, I believe I read there's some maybe issues or challenges with mercury and silica, if you could speak to that. And what I missed the first half of your presentation. What does concretely your partnership with First Nations look like? Is it just engagement, or there's a actual papered win-win? Thanks.
Yeah, so I would say the two most comparables on zinc would be Cisco Metals and Tinka, probably in terms of grade and scale. In terms of our metallurgy, it's like the fourth time I've heard metallurgy this week, so maybe it's something we need to highlight a bit more in our presentation. It's very much zoned, right? So, these were deposits that Tom and Jason, anyways, being SEDEX, they used to be kind of maligned for being a very fine grind. That was before the introduction of the ISA mill, which was pioneered at Mount Isa by then Xstrata, and then an ISA mill or some sort of comparable stirred mill is now used at like a Red Dog, a Century, etc. For our project, as you get higher and higher grade, the impurities escalate. So within the very high grade zones, we do watch for mercury. It's not uncommon in all SEDEX deposits in terms of the silica to see silica intergrowth with the sphalerite. So that's part of the reason they have to grind it so fine, is to liberate the sphalerite from the silica. The smelters don't really have a lot of capacity to handle really high silica material. I would encourage you to look at our metallurgical report. We have two. One from mid-May 2018, which was the Tom and Jason metallurgy, and then we had one late last year, October, November, that was Boundary Zone, that kind of highlights the differences and opportunities there. And then the third question was, First Nations. Yeah, nothing formal yet. So we've been, the most affected First Nation and close to us is the Ross River Dene Council. Over 50% of our business on site goes through RRDC owned or affiliated businesses. Depending on when you come to camp, it's between about 20 to 40% Indigenous, mainly Casca staff there. I think we feel like we've been operating in the spirit of an exploration agreement, and they have as well. Do they feel that as well? We, of course, would like to solidify that with a formal partnership and are working towards that. Thank you.